Hello, Derek here for Civic Punks, and I want to share a bit of a video diary, video journal about my time at UKGovCamp. So UKGovCamp is one of my favorite events to go to every year. So what is UKGovCamp? Well, UKGovCamp is an annual conference, or sorry, I should say unconference, that is organized by public servants for public servants in the UK, and it's particularly focused around how do we make government better. So it's people who are really interested in making the way that the public service works improve. Very much the civic punks that this whole entire video channel is for. It's an unconference, so that means there's no keynote speakers. Rather, the agenda is set the day of by what is important to people. So the day starts off with pitch sessions, so people can pitch an idea. I want to talk about this topic. I want to talk about that topic, and that's a really interesting format to surface a lot of like what's really interesting to the community. What are the burning issues that people are wrestling with? And because it's not keynotes, it's much more sort of deep dive discussions as people wrestle with common challenges and brainstorm ways forward. And this thing that's been happening every year for like 15 plus years now. I've only been to the last few, really since the pandemic, but it's become one of my favorites. And so, yeah, super enjoy going to it. So, why do I like going to it so much? Like I said, I think it's a couple things. It's different than a conference where you feel like you're being pitched to or sold different ideas or different things. It's much more human, much more peer to peer, and it's a really good way to sort of get your finger on the pulse of what the community is talking about. In this case, the community of civic punks here in the UK. So this year going into it, I had a couple things I was really trying to pay attention to. First, I wanted to see what things were like on the inside with the new government in place. There's an election last year. We've now had a few months with this new government. How are people feeling? What has this new government meant in terms of how public service works nowadays? The second one, of course, is AI. And I know it gets talked about a lot, but it's shaping and changing the way government works. So I want to understand how is that rippling through in terms of the public servants here in the UK now. So, key takeaways. Well, first off, it was a lot of fun. It was really nice. We did it at the Ministry of Justice, which has sort of been a bit of a home for a lot of these events because it's one of the few places in the central, like right in Westminster area, that you can get for a relatively cheap or free for this type of stuff, which is great. And yeah, it was just nice to see people again because we just don't meet like we used to before the pandemic. And so this is one of the few chances that you really get to see friends and other people who are doing really cool stuff within the space. People I've see virtually through Blue Sky and through LinkedIn who are posting interesting ideas, interesting blogs, and I get to see them in person, which is always nice. So just that human level is something I was really enjoyed. I think one of the biggest things was a shift in sort of just the energy of the space. So last year, there's just almost like this feeling of exhaustion. This feeling that people were tired, they were burnt out, they'd stretched, they hadn't really recovered from the pandemic, and they were kind of beaten up by a political environment that had been very sort of aggressively attacking the public service, to put it bluntly. This year felt different. People were still tired, haven't really had a chance to rest, but there was much more sort of an optimism, an energy, a drive forward. This feeling that change was in the air, even though it was moving more slowly than we wanted to. And this idea of patience is something that came up a few times because there's this tension I think between a lot of people who are feeling frustrated that things weren't moving faster and those who are sort of deep on the inside being like, no, trust me, things are happening. There are conversations, key strategic important conversations happening at the highest levels. It will come. And I thought this was kind of interesting because there's a lot of really cool ideas that are floating around, but it feels like a lot of those important conversations are happening at high levels and very much behind closed doors. And I kind of wish that there was more open and transparency within the public service around this instead of like a small group of elite deciding what is best. A lot of the conversations focused on how does change actually happen? How do we move forward at a systemic level? And I think part of it is just this feeling that, we haven't been successful at creating change yet. And so we need to change the way we do change. So what can we learn from the past? I think there was much more of a focus in conversations in rooms about targeting senior levels and decision makers. I think part of this is just because the community behind UK GovCamp is getting older. They're entering more senior levels of government. But also just a recognition that that's where the power sits. And if you want to create change, you got to work with those senior levels. And so a lot of the discussions, therefore, were really focused on shaping power and resource flows, moving from sort of more front end, like new websites, new forums, to much more deeper, like the actual machinery of government. How do we move resources? How are we, what are the incentive structures that we're reinforcing behavior? What does that look like? And also this idea of language mattering. I noticed is really interesting. There seems to be this movement away from a lot of the classic digital languages into new languages that are seen as being more universal or more engaging and acceptable. So a classic example is a move away from, say, agile to test and learn. The fundamentals are really the same, but test and learn is just much more accessible for more people. And I think the digital language had kind of gotten branded as like for the digital elite nerds, and there's an exclusivity to it that was not helpful. So this rebranding could be a good thing. Missions obviously came up a ton. There's a lot of buzz, but still not a lot of form yet behind it, which I think was one of the areas where you saw a lot of impatience. And this creates space for people to bring their own definitions to it. So we had a whole session on missions, and it was interesting to see the diversity of people's perspectives on what missions actually mean. I was surprised. Camden came up a lot as the model that people point to for missions, and it makes sense. A lot of Mariana Mazzucato stuff is based on the work that she did in Camden Council, which is amazing, and they're a super cool example. But there's a big difference between Camden City Council and something as big and complex as the government of the UK. So it'll be interesting to see how things translate over. But I am excited that the more systemic lens that is being brought forward to this, even though that also brings a lot of challenges. So it's great that we're moving away from a siloed department by department approach to things, because things don't, like, the problems we face aren't siloed into the departments. But this brings a lot more complex governance structures, and it'll be interesting to see how the UK government deals with this complex systemic governance. And I guess the other one of the other key themes is this idea of this desire to connect. It's been really interesting to see how the pandemic has isolated us, and how that isolation has continued even as we've now been a couple years removed from the pandemic. We still haven't really come back and connected with each other. Even though there's this desire to connect with people who are trying to solve the same problems. This is why I do what I do with Apolitical. I think creating these spaces for us to connect with people who are wrestling the same problems is something that is really important to me, and something I do with my day job. The other thing that was interesting is that the pandemic has also surfaced a lot of the diversity of where people are at. Like, neurodiversity has become a common thing now, and how does that shift the way we meet, we come together to make it more inclusive? But also geographic. People have really spread out beyond such a one-centric approach, and there's much more focus on how do we bring in people from other places. But what does that mean for the soft networks that are usually created outside of digital spaces that are so important to getting stuff done? So, where do we go from here? What's next post UK GovCamp? As I mentioned, people have a desire to connect, and I think there's going to be some interesting and fun opportunities for that. A couple that I wanted to highlight. First, Transform GovTalks. This is something that I'm working on with my friends David Durant and Gavin Freegard, as well as a growing group of volunteers that are helping us. It is a monthly meetup for people who are interested in how do we make government better. We have a series of talks, followed by discussion and social. So it's a chance to sort of get people talking about these new ideas they're forming. I will put a link for you to follow and engage, and so you can learn about the next meetup that's coming. The other one is One Team Gov. So One Team Gov is a really cool community network that formed here in the UK and then went global. That's how I first got involved in it. It pulled me into the international space many years ago. And then really with the pandemic, and I think that, the first cohort of leadership really burnt out and it kind of faded. Well, one of the key things that came out of UK GovCamp is this desire to rekindle One Team Gov. And so I know there's a meetup planned soon, and that is going to be something that's really exciting. So stay tuned for that. Follow me on Blue Sky and LinkedIn, and I'll keep posting about opportunities to get involved with One Team Gov. Other than that, that is my quick video diary. Not so quick video diary from UK GovCamp 2025. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any questions, thoughts, reflections. Add your own updates in comments as well. And other than that, stay tuned until the next video. Thank you so much.